right now we head to the D&M Leasing Hotline and welcome in our good buddy, DallasCowboys.com, Tommy Yarrish, on a day where Micah Parsons and the entire squad were there with a little crawfish boil, doing it up. Brian Schottenheimer trying to win the hearts of his players already. Tommy, how's the day been?
Yeah, afternoon, fellas. Hope you guys are doing good. Yeah, absolutely. Shotty's getting off on the right foot with a lot of these guys, seemingly. Crawfish boil certainly is not a bad way to start, especially down here. I'm a northerner myself, so I've never been much of a crawfish guy, but I can imagine that it's I've learned that it's pretty popular down here, so I'm sure that was a big hit.
So the mandatory veteran minicamp starts June 10th to the 12th. So for a guy like Micah, that's when technically he would have to show up. He spent the last couple off seasons working out privately, but how important was it that he did show up today? I know everyone on the Cowboys beat. That was the headline story. It seemed Micah did show up where he did not last year.
Yeah, no, I think it is. It's a good step in the right direction, Zach. You know, I think that when you look at what Jerry Jones said at league meetings, that you know, he wants to have total and complete satisfaction that he's got a commitment from Micah Parsons as a leader. I think stuff like this is what shows Jerry Jones, hey, okay, Micah Parsons is committed to being a leader for this team. And, you know, obviously there's a lot more things that are going to happen here these next couple of weeks, I think, to get to the finish line on this deal. But I would think it's more of a matter of when and not if that needs to happen. So you think about the leadership that the Cowboys have lost this offseason. DeMarcus Lawrence, Jordan Lewis, they need a leader, and they need a leader on the defensive side of the ball. And Micah Parsons is the name that comes to the forefront. Dak Prescott talked about it a little bit on Friday when he was at the Children's Cancer Fund Gala. And, you know, he said that he's very confident in Micah and what he can do. And, you know, who he is and what he wants to do is important as anything, and that's in being a leader. That's what stuck out to me from Dak. And, you know, having the confidence of Dak Prescott, who I would say is kind of the unequivocal voice of the locker room for Dallas, I think is a good start. And Micah showing up today for a volunteer workout is another step in the right direction, but I think there's, you know, still more work to be done.
All right, Yarrish, you live in that building. What are the walls telling you right now about this draft?
I think that the walls in my head are telling me that wide receiver is probably the most likely option at 12 broadest. I think it just makes the most sense when you think about the guys that are going to potentially be there. And the two names that for me have come to the forefront are Matthew Golden and Tetairoa McMillan, wide receiver from Texas and Arizona, respectively. You know, I think that when you look at this offense, aside from CeeDee Lamb, the Cowboys need some help at wide receiver, too. They need an explosive playmaker like Stephen Jones was telling us at league meetings. And I think both McMillan and Golden can fit that bill for the Cowboys. When you look at McMillan, I think he complements CeeDee really well because of his size and catch radius as a 50-50 ball guy. Go up and get it. That's what he's done his whole career, his whole life, really, going back to his high school days at Servite in California. He's got a volleyball background, so he uses that 6'5", 212 frame to his advantage. And then Golden, he's a blazer. Still needs to be a little bit more polished as a route runner, I think, but both of those guys can really give you a lot on the receiving side of things. I think McMillan makes more sense just because of from a body standpoint and what the Cowboys need on the outside and not necessarily in the slot, where Golden's played a little bit slot and outside, but McMillan's your outside guy. The Cowboys need an outside guy.
Well, I'll tell you what, Tommy, you covered Golden at Texas. Sell me on him right now.
Oh, well, I've covered Golden since, believe it or not, his days in high school at Klein Cain.
Ooh, wow.
He and Jaden Blue were high school teammates down there at Klein Cain. So two Texas guys there that finally reunited. Matthew Golden, I think, you know, he sold himself a little bit at the combine too by running a 4.29, and that surprised a lot of people. This is a guy who I think ran a 10.93 in the 100 as a junior in high school. So he has a track background, and that speed translates on film. He might not look like he necessarily runs 4.29 on film, but he's able to get past guys pretty quickly at the line of scrimmage. Like I mentioned, a little bit more of a little bit more polishing to be done as a route runner, but he cuts really well. His ball skills are great. I feel like when you turn on his film, it looks like he glides in his routes. And at the line of scrimmage, those first 3 or so steps when he needs to win, he wins pretty easily. Starts his routes well, high-end speed that is showcased after the catch, able to create that separation like I was talking about. Even against perfect coverage, he finds ways to win. You think back to that Georgia game in the SEC championship when Kirby Smart was jumping up there with him to try and pick off the ball. I think that was an excellent example of it. And then he has the ability, I think, to help as a return specialist. He didn't do it very much at Texas because guys either kicked the ball out of the end zone or kicked it away from him. But when he was at Houston before he transferred to Texas, he had 2 kickoff returns for touchdowns. So all of that, I think, can translate very well to the NFL level, whether it's with the Cowboys or not.
Tommy, do you think he was the MVP of Texas' playoff run last year?
Absolutely. I think 4th and 13 alone is sells it for me. You think about some of the greatest moments in Texas football history. That's going to live up there with one of them. And going into the playoff run, you think, okay, what does Isaiah Bond's health look like? Is he 100%? Can he get to that top-end speed that made him so special? And he never really did. And Matthew Golden stepped up when Texas needed it most, and he was the alpha that Texas needed. So absolutely, he was the MVP. And I think, the only other argument I think you could have would be Jahdae Barron, the corner. But he was kind of the MVP for the defense most of the season. But absolutely, Matthew Golden was big for them down the stretch.
Tommy, what do you feel like is the Cowboys' thoughts on where they stand with Mazi Smith right now? How much of a pressing need do you think it is in their minds to upgrade from him on the interior of the defensive line?
Well, I get the sense that Matt Eberflus likes Mazi Smith a lot. He's more of a 3-tech guy himself. Eberflus is in terms of what he wants to be the engine of his defense, but he likes himself some 1-tech too. He had a couple of good ones in Chicago. It never really amounted to much, but in terms of wins. But from a run defense standpoint, the Bears defended the run pretty well with Matt Eberflus when he was the defensive play caller. As far as upgrading goes, I think you would look at the additions they made in free agency and they can say, okay, well, we bolstered up the defensive line up front to help our run game with bringing guys like Solomon Thomas into the room. But you certainly look at this draft class and say, wow, this is a pretty loaded defensive tackle group. And I think they've said that too. Stephen Jones and Brian Schottenheimer both told us at league meetings that they love the depth in the defensive tackle room. So I think 1-tech is certainly an area where they get a guy and try to push Mazi Smith, not necessarily replace him. I think it's a little bit too early in his career to be thinking about that. But you're absolutely right that a step needs to be made in the right direction for him. So I think that you look at this group now, the question would be how early do you want to go and get a 1-tech guy and who's on the board there for you? It is deep, but how deep do you want to let it go? When does the run happen on defensive tackles? Those are all questions that Dallas needs to answer, considering some of the other needs they've got across the board too.
Tommy Yarrish, DallasCowboys.com, with us here in the GBAG Nation. Now, we've talked to receivers. And obviously, Genty's a guy that we would love. I mean, the mock drafts early on, it was Genty. Then it's like he's not going to be there. Then it was Tet McMillan. Now you've got Golden that's getting a lot of hype. Let's say, for just argument's sake, all 3 are gone. Is there another name that you think could be in play that maybe we're not talking about enough at number 12 for the Cowboys?
Well, I think trade back is in play there, but that's going to be harder to come by. I'll give you 2 that could just – based off of assumption, really. You look at what this team needs in terms of outside of the skill position players, right? You look at guys on the edges that are isolated one-on-one, offensive tackles, defensive ends. I think one name that could surprise you would be Armand Membu from Missouri. If he drops to number 12, he's kind of got that versatility to play tackle or guard. I feel like super athletic, uses it well in the run and pass game. And this is a team that right guard spot is open for competition. And based on how good they feel about the guys that they've got in that room determines whether or not, if all 3 of our guys are gone and Membu slides to number 12, I think you're looking at a pretty good potential option there at your right guard spot. And then the other one would be Jahad Campbell. I think Jahad Campbell, the linebacker from Alabama, is a really interesting case study for this because I would say he's linebacker 1 in this class, but I feel like there are some teams that have him higher than folks in the media. I'm not saying that Dallas does. I'm just saying in general across the league. I feel like there are teams that have him higher because he can do so much for you from sideline to sideline as a linebacker. But I really love what he's able to do as a pass rusher too. He gets on the quarterback off the edge pretty quickly, and can just do a whole lot for you as that kind of chess piece on the defensive side. I think Jahad Campbell is what a lot of people think Jalen Walker from Georgia is. I think Walker's more of an edge rusher, doesn't have the linebacking ability that Campbell does, but I think he's a really good all-around football player. So if the Cowboys think that too, that's another guy that I would keep an eye on there at 12.
Talking with Tommy Yarrish at DallasCowboys.com here on The Fan. When Dak says that he could play today if the Cowboys were playing a game from a health-wise standpoint, are you buying that?
I'm buying it. Yeah, I'm buying it. I'm not saying it's a good thing if he could play today. I think that what what stood out from that conversation was him following up with saying, okay, I could play a game if I needed to today, but the goal for me is to play 17 games. So just because he can play today doesn't necessarily mean that he's 100% fully recovered, ready to get out of the gates and go. I think Dak Prescott needs to reach the point where he is 100% and can feel like he can play 17 games if he wants to return to the 2023 version and not what we saw at the start of the year from Dak Prescott. And so mobility is going to be a big part of that. And that's why it's so important that he gets closer to that 100% than, say, capping out by the start of the season at 85 or 90% in terms of his health, just because mobility is such a big part of his game. Not necessarily, getting out and scrambling for 8-10 yards whenever he can, but he's been his best on play action when he's moving the pocket and moving around the field. So that aspect of it is going to be really important, and that's why I think it's more important for him to get to 100%. But no, I do buy that he could probably play a game today if he needed to.
Are you getting the call up for the Draft 101 on Thursday night with the Whataburger and all the Tolos coming out here answering draft questions?
As far as I know, I'm invited. I mean, you guys got to tell me if I'm not invited.
Oh, man, you're in.
You got a spot, Tommy.
You're in. You're going to answer all the questions. We're going to eat Whataburger while you answer questions.
You just sit in the back with me and eat some Whataburger, Tommy, and we'll heckle Wolchuk and Broadus during the proceedings.
Oh, man. Well, that sounds good to me. But no, I'm looking forward to being there and hanging out with you guys and the Tolos. It's going to be a great time. I'm really excited for it.
Heck yeah, you're a beast. We appreciate it, Tommy. Have a great day.
All right, gentlemen. I appreciate you guys.